So first, I wanted to ask you about some of these policing bills that have been proposed by House Democrats that would make it easier to prosecute police who have done things wrong, banning chokeholds. I know that you have had legislation in the past that you would like to pass. Where are you with the House's bill? Do you think that there's any way that you could support it?
Well, to be frank, I haven't looked at it, but let me just say I think it's a big mistake to simply view this as a police issue. This issue, clearly the murder of Mr. Floyd has outraged the country and has served as a catalyst for attention. But this is a much broader topic than simply police matters. We have had for a very long time in this country consistent grievances on the part of African Americans who believe that their lives are not valued and their problems go unaddressed. And it has festered for far too long, and we need to act on it. And I know there are people out there that say, well, race is not an issue anymore in America. But I would say to them that if you look at these disparities that now exist on health care, on education, on housing, on employment, they fall along racial lines and need to be addressed. We can't be a society, we can't be a country, and we can't be prosper, we can't flourish, and we can't be successful if 12 to 13% of our nation's population believe that they are not valued. Frankly, we can't succeed as a nation without them, because we're in a time of competition against a country in China that has 3 times as many people as we have. But we need all hands on deck. We can't afford to leave anyone behind. So I will hope that this moment serves as an opportunity to address all of these challenges in a serious and comprehensive way. And I think it begins by listening and by learning from people who have a different experience and have a different background.
I know back in 2019, you teamed up with Senator Booker and Harris to propose a group that would study some of these challenges that are faced by African Americans. Are you still pushing that bill, and do you have hope that this could pass this time?
Yeah, sure. We have hope to pass it this week. Look, I know when people hear something about a study, they roll their eyes. We created this in Florida when I was the Speaker of the House almost over a decade ago, working with, at that time, State Senator Frederica Wilson, who's now in Congress. And it's not just a study. This is a commission that annually will issue a report on the issues that are impacting and leading to these disparities among African American men and boys. And we need that at the federal level, because this is a complex issue, and it really goes beyond what people recognize. Look, no one can tell me that if a child is living in a stable home, raised by both of their parents, going to a good school, and has access to private tutors, does not have greater opportunities than a child growing up in a broken home, in unsafe housing, in a dangerous neighborhood, in a failing school, sometimes with no access to Wi-Fi. That is not equality of opportunity. And if we don't address it, and if we don't break that cycle, it will perpetuate and continue generation after generation. And when a disproportionate number of people with those disadvantages are African American, and a disproportionate number of the people with those advantages are not African American, you get both the racial disparities and ultimately the grievances that we now have in this country. These are the kinds of factors that we need to look at beyond just the issue of the police departments.
I wanted to ask you, Senator, do you believe that there is systemic racism in policing nationwide? Is this a systemic problem?
Well, I believe that, unfortunately, our fallen nature as human beings is to dislike people that are different than us. And that's not just an America phenomenon. Everywhere in the world you see that play out. And so anywhere you have human beings, that fallen nature will present itself. Are there people in police departments that are racist? Of course there are. Police officers will tell you that. And we need to find those people and root them out. But I also believe there's a tremendous number of police officers who are not motivated by race and what they do, who do extraordinary work every single day. And we need to talk about them as well. Again, the issue of systemic racism is a complex one. In the 21st century, race is still a factor. It's not Bull Connor racism, it's not Jim Crow racism, but it is a racial factor, and primarily in many cases, I believe, driven by the fact that the people who are making decisions in business, in education, in academia, in government, and across the board are oftentimes oblivious to the special set of challenges and circumstances that are facing Americans of color in this country. And if they're oblivious to these things, then they go unaddressed, and that's what we've seen.
I know overnight we had heard that Senator Romney and Senator Tim Scott had been kind of teaming up to look at some bipartisan solutions. Are you confident that this time, Republicans and Democrats are going to be able to rally around some kind of solution in legislation?
Well, I'm confident that this time feels different, but for it to actually be different, then I think we have to do a couple things. The first is we have to learn more. We have to listen more. You asked me a moment ago about whether I believe there's systemic racism in the police departments. The issue is not whether there is. The real issue is that a large number of African Americans believe that there is. And if a substantial percentage of your population believes that there's a problem, there's a problem. And you have to address that feeling. And it begins by listening to people. Look, I know incredible police officers who do extraordinary work every single day. Frankly, the vast majority of police officers do not want to be involved in a shooting at any time in their career. They just don't. They prefer not to be. But I also know a police officer, an African-American gentleman, who over the course of a number of years was pulled over at least 7 times by his own department. How does he explain that to his son? How humiliating is it to have to explain that to his son? We have to hear these stories. You don't have to end up agreeing with everybody on everything, but there is a level of respect and understanding that comes from listening to people who have a different experience and therefore a different view of matters. So I hope that that's what we're entering into, because if we do, then I think we can find some solution. So yes, this time feels different, but we've got to work real hard to make sure that this time is different.
I know we talked about a month ago about a small error that created a duplication in some PPP loans. Have you been briefed on this matter from SBA? Do you know where the error arose? Because they have not been transparent with us in that.
Well, the last we heard from them is they think it's less than 200 loans in the country that got double payments, and they're trying to figure out exactly what was it on the system. Some of it, frankly, was timing, where there were multiple applications hitting the system at the same time, and so the system didn't match one number to the other when it came time to disbursement. These things will happen. It doesn't appear to be a widespread issue across the system. My other understanding is that virtually every single one of those have returned their funds or inquired on how they can return those funds. So it doesn't appear to be a widespread issue, but it happened, and but it's certainly it wasn't a major impediment in terms of the program working. When all is said and done, I think when we look back at this, there are 2 things that impacted. The first is that it was new. We have to keep reminding people this never existed before, so this was something that was new for everybody. And number 2 is that we were operating under very unique conditions. No one had ever faced sort of a paralysis of so much of our economy all of a sudden. But what I'm pretty confident of is that despite its expected glitches, when all is said and done, by far and without question, the single most successful thing the federal government has done to respond to COVID-19 has been the PPP program. Without it, millions of Americans would have been unemployed or laid off, and without it, all of these small businesses would have had a tough time restarting as they are right now.